Welcome to another episode of Altitude Advantage. I'm your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez, here in the Broncos podcast studio, sitting across from the lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. The camera just loves switching because literally I said your name and it was like, bam, let's show.
Knew I was here.
We're
back.
It knew you were here. You're back from the future because Sunday Night Football started in November and then ended in December with a huge win. I know.
That's crazy. I didn't even think about that.
Exactly. Now you're back from the future because the Broncos improved to 10-2 after defeating the Washington Commanders 27-26 in overtime, following obviously the big play heard around, say the league, around the world. The big play by Nick Bonito. The Broncos actually complete their sweep against NFC East opponents. They snap a 5-game losing streak in overtime games and extended their win streak to 9 games. This game is what Sunday Night Football is all about. What did I say? Mini Super Bowls. Like, sometimes the best just comes out from some of these games and it brings that excitement. And regardless of records, we've seen it constantly. We've talked about it constantly. It doesn't matter. Any given Sunday, teams can show up and really surprise you. And the way that this team played against the Washington Commanders, what the Washington Commanders were able to do, especially Marcus Mariota with his legs, it was fun to watch, but even better because it's Dub Day and we're celebrating that and improving to 10-2. 10th win of the season is huge.
Yeah, that's last year, obviously, the Broncos won 10 games all year. So to get to 10 wins through 12 games, that's pretty remarkable. It speaks to the season this team is having. There's all sorts of takeaways from this game, as you would imagine, from a close one-score, 1-point overtime win. I think I do want to start by saying one thing, which is the Commanders played well, and they, especially offensively, they made plays. And outside of the one interception, Marcus Mariota played really well and made some big-time throws, made some plays with his legs. And Bo Nix said that after the game, that you do have to credit Marcus Mariota in that offense. Terry McLaurin comes back for what they did. And so I know there were, and we'll talk about it, there were some long third-down conversions. There were some fourth-down conversions. There were some clutch plays that the Commanders made that, quite frankly, we're not used to seeing the Broncos defense give up this season. They've just been so dominant. And, Riley Moss after the game was talking about, hey, that we've got to get some things cleaned up and there's areas of improvement for the Broncos. But I also just think it's worth a hat tip to the Commanders offense and Marcus Mariota, who came in and played a really good game. And sometimes, as Sean Payton said on Monday, like, those guys get paid too. They're professionals as well on the other side, and they just made some plays in this game that kept it close, that almost gave the Commanders a chance to win. And as Sean Payton said, it's one of those games you hate if you're on the losing side and you love if you're on the winning side. And luckily the Broncos found a way to get a win. They made plays when it mattered in the clutch, and it's just what we expect now from this team, right? This is just what they do. It's what they do. When it matters, they make plays. And Alex Singleton was asked, hey, is this something that, like, do you need to stop playing one-score games? And he's like, well, let's just keep winning one-score games. Let's just keep playing like this. And like you said, now, 8-2 one-score games. They've got their longest road winning streak since since 2015 when they won Super Bowl 50. They continue to break streaks and create new records. And Bo Nix, we'll talk about him. He's tied with John Elway now for the most game-winning drives in a season in Broncos history. I mean, they keep finding a way, but this was a nice performance from Washington. And so while they are now 3-9, just a little bit of credit to them for how they played, for sure.
It was definitely nice to see as soon as the game ended, you saw Bo Nix go straight to Marcus Mariota and really talk to him and kind of share a moment with him post-game, because they both really left it all on the field. And one thing that impressed me a lot about Mariota was how fast he got rid of the football. I mean, that made it really difficult for Nick and Jonathan Cooper, and that defense line has been so great all season to really put pressure on him because there just was no time because he let go of the ball so fast. So I think that was really big. But the adjustments they were able to make, I thought Pat Surtain's return was very epic in terms of what was needed, and he kind of came back at the right time as Terry McLaurin also came back. I think my favorite play of the game was when Scary Terry tried to play it off like he was going to just walk, and then he just took off, but Pat was ready. Like, you see him kind of looking, and then Pat stayed on him. That really saved the touchdown there. And so I think that's what this team preaches, staying ready at all times, regardless of record, regardless of team, regardless of a backup quarterback. It doesn't matter. And Not saying that other teams do that, but we saw, there's a new leader in the NFC because the Panthers went in, hosted the Rams at home and defeated them, and now the Bears are the number 1 seed in the NFC. So everything can change very quickly, and we're going to talk about the AFC later in the show. But I think when you talk about these big plays, that's how quick a game can change. If you underestimate what's about to be played in front of you, it could lead to, unfortunately, the other team winning.
Yeah, and I want to get to the defense in a second because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about with them and the AFC playoff picture. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of good stuff to get to. I think one thing that stands out, and I wrote a story about it this morning, was
DenverBroncos.com.
That's right. Go click. Click. Sean Payton talked about any Super Bowl team. Go look at teams that go on and win a championship. They have games like this where it's an opponent that on paper maybe it doesn't look like it should be as close as it is, and yet they find a way to win those games and pull out kind of the ugly ones. And the Broncos, just kind of quite honestly, have had several of those that they've pulled out, whether it's the Jets game, the Raiders game on Thursday night, this game. If the Broncos can go on and get the 1 seed, and as we record this, the Patriots have not played. They have their bye week next week, so even if they win, if the Broncos get a win next week, they'll be in control of their own destiny from that perspective. If the Broncos end up getting the 1 seed, or if it's the 2 seed, which right now, if you look at it, those are the 2 seeds that the Broncos are not assured to get, but are most likely to get, given that Indy drops another game. Their Broncos are now 2 games ahead of them. But all that said, if you get one of those seeds, you're not going to look back at this game as a win and be like, oh, but they only beat the 3-9 Washington Commanders by 1 point, or they only beat the Jets, who at that time were winless, by 2 points, or they only beat the Raiders by 3 points. You're just going to say, hey, they had X number of wins in a row, which right now it's 9, and you hope to keep that going and improve that total. But Sean Payton said, hey, go look up the 2009 Saints. And I went and looked it up this morning. 2009 Saints, they were undefeated at that time. They go to Washington. Kid you not, 3-8 Washington Commanders team. They are down 10 in the fourth quarter. The Saints come back, win the football game, keep their undefeated season alive, sends the Washington team to 3-9, which is their record this morning as well. So a parallel there. The Saints obviously go on to win the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah.
And your ability to find ways to win when you're not at your best, or when teams just show up with their best.
Yeah.
And I think you could argue that was pretty close, especially offensively, to an A or A+ game from Washington's offense. To be able to find a way to win is important, especially when like you mentioned, around the league, there were all these upsets, and the Panthers knock off the Rams. The Bengals go to Baltimore and knock them off. The Chiefs lose to the Cowboys. The Bears go to Philadelphia and knock them off. Houston goes to Indy and wins. I think I wrote it last night, and so I was a little delirious. I mean, it's quick sidebar. How do people do this East Coast night game thing? How do they do it? I mean, I grew up on the East Coast. I lived on the East Coast for I didn't go to college there, but like the first 18 years of my life, and watched primetime games. I never worked a primetime game.
Yeah.
But my goodness, we work pretty late here when just to pull the curtain back a little bit, when we have a primetime game in Denver, we're working till about 1:30 in the morning, 2, especially if it's a big win and there's a lot to get out. Well, now you make that East Coast time, and it's like
to add 2 hours to that.
It was 3 in the morning last night, and I was like, man, I still have a ton to do. And I was like, I'm going to sleep for a couple hours and then do it in the morning. But I don't know how. It's just a little bit of solidarity to all those people that are covering teams that play a lot of East Coast primetime games. I am, Mountain Time. I know you're a Pacific Time fan, I'm sure, but Mountain Time is by far the best from a sports perspective.
I can see that. Look, again, pulling back the curtain, before I came to the Broncos, I did work Sunday Night Football, and I dreaded East Coast Sunday Night Football games because we wouldn't leave the stadium till about 12:30, 1 in the morning sometimes, leaving the stadium. And that's just getting the crew ready to leave and things like that. The portion of the show would be done, but we would still have crews there working to basically get wires and all that stuff taken out, trucks rolling out, all that stuff. By the time you get to your hotel, it's 2, 3 in the morning. Like it's insane. Like from a working standpoint, even from a fan standpoint. Like I have a lot of friends on the East Coast that they're like, hey, they woke up this morning, like, oh, good win. I was like, did you watch? They're like, no.
Like, I mean, the game didn't.
I was asleep.
The game didn't end till midnight.
That's why I said you were back from the future because it started in November and December in the East Coast, and then.
And I think like Mountain Time, where the primetime game's done by 9:30, love it.
Yeah. See, that's like Pacific time. Like you're done by 8:20. You can still go to late dinner. You can still go out for drinks.
It's a little too early because, like a primetime game here, like a Thursday night, Monday night, ends at 6 or begins at 6:20. I'm normally missing the first quarter. I'm missing the first 10 minutes of the game. If it were at 5:20, I'd miss half the football game every week. So 5:20 is a little early. Plus, like a 9 a.m. kick for college football. That's a little early.
Used to go to those. We would still tailgate with orange juice.
I believe it, and that's it. I'm sure. I don't know how I got on that.
Because you realize like how late you're working with those stats.
And I think 7 underdogs won this weekend, and that's before obviously the Giants. It would be a big help to the Broncos if the Giants could go on the road and add another upset and beat the Patriots, but that should give you an indication of, I think every team played this weekend. There were no byes. So of the 16 games that were played, almost half of them were upsets. And a lot of those spreads were not like, close. Some touchdown underdogs that ended up winning football games like Chicago going to Philly.
Huge win, yeah.
So, Cincinnati going to Baltimore, like those were big underdogs. And so that's where, like, I think if you watch the Broncos every week and you're dialed into this team, you look at this game and you think, or you may think, oh, they only beat the Commanders by 1 point, would have expected more. But when you look around the league and you have this perspective, and then you toss in that not only is this game a win, but it's part of a longer 9-game win streak, is the nature of the NFL is that 1 week you're going to be off your game or a team is going to play at their best and you're going to get knocked off. And sometimes it happens against a really good team, and sometimes it happens against teams that it shouldn't probably, right? And we've talked about that, whether it's Buffalo going to Miami or, I'm sure the Eagles don't feel like they should have lost that game at home to the Bears this weekend. The Ravens probably don't feel like they should have lost that game to the Bengals. And so, but that happens to teams in the NFL. And Sean Payton talks all the time, adversity is going to come, and it still might come during this Broncos season. It came very early, and we'll see if the Broncos have to weather another storm. But part of what makes this so impressive is that this is another example, and I don't even know if this was about the Broncos not being at their best. It was more, I think, about just Washington playing a really good game. You survived another team playing a really good football game.
Coming off their bye week, fully rested too.
With their star
best
star receiver coming back, and still found a way to win this football game. And so, tying it all back together, Sean Payton talks about, hey, when you're a championship team, you have these types of games. And the Broncos, I think, and we don't know how this ends, right? But if the Broncos do make a run in the postseason, and we're talking about this someday as like a really special season, I think you point to this as, and maybe it's not going to ever get the same attention as the Chiefs win or the comeback against the Giants or the win in Philly. Like it won't get that level. But like if you look back at that 2015 season that the Broncos had, like there was a really tight game in Cleveland, for example, that the Broncos needed to, I believe, come back and win. It was tight, and I think it even went to overtime. And like that's the sort of game that if you were picking the top like 3 moments from that Super Bowl 50 season, that one's probably not on it, right? Like you think of Bradley Roby returning the fumble for a touchdown in Kansas City. You think of the game against the Packers where they just dominate Aaron Rodgers. You think about the snow game where C.J. Anderson gets the touchdown. You think about Manning coming back in against the Chargers and securing the 1 seed. But that game against Cleveland, for example, it's just as important. Yeah. And as you look at that season for the 2015 Broncos, there were a bunch of those different games that were 1-score games that, maybe don't end up like on the highlight reel, but are just as important in the grand scheme of things that you don't get the 1 seed without. And so it'll be interesting to see when we look back on this season in a few months, like if the Broncos do make a run to a conference championship game or a Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl. These are like the little moments that'll be worth remembering. And I also think it's part of that belief that you start to develop and continue. Not start to develop. At this point, you just have it. These guys, I think I wrote it, they don't think they can win anymore. It's like they know they're going to win. Yeah. And they might give up a last-second touchdown, and they're just like, we'll figure it out on the two-point conversion, right? Like they're just doing – and sometimes they're doing exactly what they need to do, right? Like, and nothing more. Yeah. But they're still doing that.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it, just like all the moving parts that we've seen from different teams winning and losing. And, the Colts lost to the Texans, the Jaguars, third straight win, and now moves them into tie atop the AFC South. And then the Texans on a 4-game win streak, they face the Chiefs next week on Sunday Night Football. So there's a lot of moving parts that are still going on in the AFC, and the wild card spots are all tied at 8-4, I believe. And so you have the Chargers, you have Indy, you have Buffalo. We talked about this last week. Like, this is why these wins are so important, because you have to keep pace and separate as much as you can. Getting that 10th win is hard to do. And I think when you heard guys from the team talking, Adam Trautman spoke to the media on Monday, and he kind of mentioned, like, yes, it's kind of a cheesy answer, but like, we just believe that we are a good enough team to overcome things. And knowing that adjustments were made, on that final 2-point conversion play that allowed Bonito to have a straight shot unblocked at Mariota, his long arms and everything, like, he is an explosive player. And thankfully that worked out the way that it did. But, each guy is just so confident that, as you mentioned, they're going to figure it out. They don't know how, they don't know when, but like, they will figure it out. And when you have these tough games, you go back to that Buffalo Bills game, when they're going into the half, you're trying to figure out what to do. And the second half was a different story. It's kind of, you learn from that. These growing pains are what they learned from the Colts loss, from the Chargers loss. And now they flipped that narrative of not being able to finish games. And that was something that stemmed from last season. And I think as you look at the biggest plays of the game, and I know that you rewatched the game, but like, when you kind of sit with it, you kind of look like, okay, like, it was good to see Evan Ingram, really come to life, especially in the fourth. Adam Trautman spoke about him as well, and the fact of, I believe Ingram led in receiving. Adam Trautman was third. I think Cortland was second. But like, you have this other area that you're still gonna unlock, and that just becomes even scarier as you continue into December.
Yeah, and that I pulled it up real quick. That Browns game, Broncos were 5-0. Browns were 2-3, and I think ultimately that year.
He's searching right
Ultimately,
now.
That year finished 3-13, so not a great team by any stretch of the imagination. Broncos turn it over 3 times. They're trailing in the fourth quarter. Manning has a pick 6. He throws 3 picks. They find a way to win the football game, and so those are the games you got to win. But I think, when you talk about the big plays in this game, I think it's obviously easiest to start at the very end with Nick Bonito's pass deflection. That I think.
Hashtag Pro Bowl vote.
Yeah, hashtag Pro Bowl vote. I don't know if saying it does anything, but if you go type it, it will.
It reminds me, it's magic. If you type it on Twitter and you tweet it, it's magic.
That's true. It makes a little Pro Bowl sign, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
One thing that I think makes Nick Bonito special is he doesn't just have the ability to rush the path. Oh my gosh, I'm like so tired I can barely speak.
I'm surprised you have water and not coffee.
He doesn't. Yeah, that's true. I probably need both. He doesn't just have the ability to rush the passer. He also just has great instincts. And I think you saw that last year when he picked off Jameis Winston and took it back for a touchdown. You saw it when he stepped in front of that Adonai Mitchell lateral, I guess it was, pass back to Anthony Richardson. And it's those instincts that I think are really special. And Sean Payton was saying that some of the stuff Bo Nix does, you can't teach it necessarily. I think there's an element of that too with Nick Bonito where he just kind of like gets it. And even when you watch that play, like he has his arms up coming in, but then like I think if you keep your arm up, there's a chance Mariota can like loft it over you.
Because he knows how high you are now.
Yeah, and instead at the last second he like swats at it. And it's like blocking a shot in basketball, right? Where it changes.
Which he brags about playing basketball, of having played basketball and being this like basketball star.
And so he like that changes the launch angle or whatever you want to call it, and he ends up making a terrific play. And it's a good thing he did because Jeremy McNichols is wide open behind him. It's worth noting, and I think people have pointed this out. It did look like there was a little bit of a pick route there by Washington. Looked like there was a little bit of a pick route on the touchdown. Looked like there are some pick routes throughout the game. So that'll be interesting to see. You know, does that get cleaned up next week if people try to run that against the Broncos, both in terms of how the Broncos defended and how it's officiated. But that was something certainly you notice. So that was a big play. Earlier, like you've got Bonito has Marcus Mariota in his grasp.
Yes.
And then that whole section of time, or like 3 or 4 plays, was just like a roller coaster of emotions. And I'm sure if you looked at any win probability chart, it's probably going up and down, up and down, up and down, because it looks like the game is over. And Sean Payton even said he disconnected his headset, which he said he's never done his entire NFL career. He just thought the game was over, and so he took his thing out, and then it was like, oh, the game's not over. Yeah. And Bonito kind of said, hey, if I didn't have this cast on this club on my hand,
he did.
Then I would have gotten Mariota. But so you have that. That was a critical moment. I think that, and kind of just working backwards here, and we'll get to the offense, but like the overtime drive was it was near perfect.
Yeah.
5 plays to go, I think 72 yards. RJ Harvey has a terrific block pickup at one point.
Huge.
Evan Ingram makes a great play with his speed, run after catch ability. Then RJ Harvey powers through for the touchdown. So those were big plays. Alex Singleton, in his return from surgery, just makes a terrific play down the middle of the field, breaking up a pass to Zach Ertz that probably leads to at least 3 points and maybe leads to more. We didn't even mention the fact that late in the game, the Broncos hold the Commanders to a field goal, but at that point you felt lucky to just hold them to a field goal because they were down, I think, at like the 14-yard line or something, and it was quite. It got a little dicey there at the end of regulation. So those were big plays. Obviously, Bo Nix is falling to the side, touchdown pass at the end of
off the ground.
Right before halftime. That was remarkable. So there were, and I mentioned this in my story, that when you talk about winning close games, there is an element, I think, of can you close it out in the final minute? Can you make the play at the very end of the game like the Bonito? But there's also this element of you can't do that unless you also make some of these plays throughout the game. Like if Bo doesn't get that pass off to Cortland and you have to settle for 3 points there, does it change the game? If Dre Greenlaw doesn't pick off Marcus Mariota and they get 3 points there, does it change the game? If Alex Singleton allows that catch and now the Commanders go in and take the lead, does it change the game? And the answer is yes to all of those. And so
all the above.
Yeah, like in these 1 point wins, and the Broncos have won 4 games by a combined 10 points over the last month, basically. And when you look at those, it is about the end of game, but it's also like who's making more of those deciding plays throughout. And more often than not, it's been the Broncos, and that's a big reason why they've been able to win football games.
On the preview show going into this matchup, we talked about turnovers and very specific about it, and how J-Mac's interception on Patrick Mahomes really changed the dynamic of that drive, of the momentum swing, things like that. That Dre Greenlaw pick was massive, especially because Mariota had been releasing the ball so fast that was one of the few times he really held on to it, kind of threw across his body, and then it was just perfectly picked out from the air by Dre Greenlaw. And that's what you needed. You needed like that big defensive stop. We've talked about how the fact of this defense is so dynamic in the pass rush and things like this, but when you look at, to give you chills. I tried to play. I was like just went through you, like the power of Dre Greenlaw and the interception that he had. But I think when you look at just how they're able to, again, capitalize on those things, you have to just appreciate the way that Dre and Talanoa Hufanga play. They were everywhere on the field, and that's exactly what you brought them in for. And so when they got that huge interception, that really kind of changed the momentum, because Mariota could have potentially scored there. That changes a lot in the game as well. And so for that turnover to come at that exact time, especially knowing how important turnovers have been in the last few games in terms of just causing that pressure, I think was really huge for this team because, everyone kind of feeds off that energy. And I think that really added on to it, especially when, again, like you can't stress it enough how good Mariota played. Pat Surtain mentioned it. Jonathan Cooper mentioned it after the game. Like, you have to give credit there because he was definitely playing at a high level that we had to adjust to. And so when you're able to take advantage of the few mistakes that a player is making, that can be the difference in the game. And it showed once again in week 13.
Yeah, that was a big play. And the defense got better as the game went along. And obviously there's the overtime touchdown drive, which I know kind of suggests that Washington still found a way to move the ball, which is true. But like the Broncos early, I think, allowed third down conversions on 6 of the first 7 third down attempts. And then Washington finished 7 of 18 on third down. So they allowed 1 conversion over the final 10 attempts, which I think now that I'm saying that out loud, I think I did the math wrong in my story last night.
They were 8 for 17 on third
8 for
down.
17. Okay. So, 2 of their final 10. Like that was a big thing. I think what's interesting to me is whenever you always think about what's next, right? And like, how does it impact what's next? And this was more success than we've seen a team have against the Broncos defense in a while. And so you start to wonder, okay, well, is this matchup specific? And let's give them credit. They've got good football players. Terry McLaurin is a good receiver.
Yes.
Deebo Samuel is one of the better number 2s, I think, in the league. Zach Ertz can still play and had over 100 yards. He's the first guy since Devonta Smith to have 100 yards against the Broncos back in week 5. And then, like we said, Marcus Mariota played well. So there's that collection of skill players. There is the fact that they were getting the ball out so quick and really minimizing the Broncos' pass rush. And I saw a stat this morning. It was the lowest pressure percentage by the Broncos since week 3, that Miami game 2 years ago. And so It's been a long time since somebody slowed down the Broncos' pass rush in this way. And I think that there are a couple of reasons for it. Like you mentioned, throwing the quick passes. Then there was the run game, both from a running back and a quarterback standpoint. And I think that Sean Payton pointed that out. That's going to be difficult, I think, for teams to replicate because not everybody has a quarterback that has those movement skills and the QB run skills like Marcus Mariota. And certainly there's some teams in the NFL that have that. But like if I looked at the rest of the way down the Broncos schedule in terms of Geno Smith, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, I switched those, but you get it. Mahomes, Justin Herbert. Like,
yes.
None of those guys kind of have that same type of mobility, I would say, or like that they're not going to be as involved in the QB run game. And who knows what you see in the postseason, but at least for the rest of the regular season, that's going to be difficult to replicate, which I think when you have that threat, it makes it easier for the running back to run. Now you've got to play with a heavier box. It makes it easier for to take those shots down the field. And despite all those things that maybe played into the Commanders' favor, the Broncos still got them in a bunch of third and long situations, right? And where the Broncos were hurt was they allowed conversions in those situations. There was a 3rd and 13, a 3rd and 12 that I think they ran for and converted, a 3rd and 8, and then obviously some 4th down conversions there at the end of the game. If you can clean those up, then you're looking at a much different story. And so I'd like to believe that what we saw is correctable, that some of it is coming off, especially some of the missed tackles we saw early, like is coming off the bye, kind of get back into the swing of things. Yeah. And that by the time you get to Las Vegas on Sunday, that a lot of those things are cleaned up and corrected and kind of back to quote unquote normal. But we'll have to see because this is a copycat league and everybody is going to look at what they did to Denver's defense and say, hey, can we find a similar way to attack them? And so now it's up to Vance Joseph to kind of get back in the lab and figure out, hey, how do we make sure that doesn't happen again? But I think, again, they just made plays. And there was a stretch there at the end of the game where they had 1st down and goal at the 2, and the Broncos got a stop, got another stop, got another stop, Commanders score on 4th down, and then the Broncos get the stop on the 2-point conversion. So 4 of 5 plays from inside the 3-yard line, Broncos defense comes up with a stop. And I'd bet if you had most defenses play that 5 chances from the 2-yard line, I'm guessing not a lot of defenses are only allowing 1 score there. And so you still saw the Broncos defense make plays. And I truly do think it was like kind of a game of inches to some degree, where if Benito drags Mariota down there, now you're talking about, okay, the Broncos won 27-20. They got to stop on the overtime drive. Or if, they're able to, I'm trying to think of another situation where it was like really close. There were a couple penalties. And I just think this was a unique situation. And I have faith, based on what we've seen all year, that the Broncos will be able to bounce back defensively. And it's also not like they gave up 30 points. They gave up 26 points, including overtime. So we'll kind of see how that develops. But defensively, it was again kind of this back and forth game. There were these huge plays, and then there were these plays where the Commanders made some nice conversions that we just haven't seen this defense give up in a while. So it's at least something that, as we go through this week, I'll be interested to watch, of like, we spent a lot of time talking about, hey, how does the offense kind of find more consistency? This week, maybe the conversation's a little bit about, hey, how does the defense kind of get back to that dominant performance?
Jonathan Cooper, after the game, said, he's like, we're coming off a bye week. He's like, we looked it, and it's something that we have to realize, like, hey, next week, like, we can't afford to do that. And I think that's one of those things where it's like, yes, but like the bye week was also needed given how much.
Oh, for sure.
For sure, like how much like travel. And I think sometimes people underestimate, like, when you're just going because you have to, and then you get a time to rest, it kind of drops on you how much rest you actually need. And then you have to kind of revamp that up. And so to your point of how kind of matched up this game was, I mean, just looking at the stats, total yards, Broncos had 402, Washington had 419. They each had a turnover. Penalties, 5 for 33 for the Broncos, 5 for 35 yards for the Washington Commanders. Third down, Broncos 7 for 15, Washington 8 for 17. Red zone, they were both 3 for 5. Time of possession was pretty much split down the middle. And I think the biggest thing in the fourth quarter that I saw is the announcers kept saying it too. They were just like, wow, this Broncos defense must be exhausted. They've been on the field for so long. That stamina is exactly what the Broncos defense in particular preached about wanting to get to during training camp. During training camp, they were very adamant of like, we're going to be in situations where we're going to be exhausted. We're going to be tired. It goes back to, I remember, I don't know if I'm sure you recall because you're like an elephant with your memory. But when Adam Trautman had mentioned that, I believe it was Adam Trautman, that was probably one of the best training camp practices they ever had because of how physical it was, how draining it was in the sun, in the heat, with the pads, all these things. That's why you do that, because when you're down in overtime, you're tired, it's late, you're on prime time conditions, whatever it is, you're able to push through that. Because for the announcers to continuously say, wow, this Broncos defense is really exhausted. Wow, they must be so tired. They must be so tired. You wouldn't think that given the effort that you got from everybody in that final drive, including, again, the big play from Nick Bonito. And so that's the stamina that you look for. And I think that's getting even more solidified on the defense, and it's getting built up on the offense, because you talked about the run game. RJ Harvey, regardless of the stats, was pivotal in this game. And I think regardless of how the rest of the season plays out, yes, the rushing is going to come, but his threat as a receiving running back is huge. I mean, he finished with 2 touchdowns in the game, obviously the crucial one to put the Broncos back on top and then really notch the last one. So I think just the connection you've seen between him and Bo, how impressed with you with RJ Harvey and him living up to the moment with J.K. Dobbins being out? Yeah,
he's got, like, to some degree, he's got no other choice, right? Like, he's now in this moment, has this opportunity. I thought that offensively, the Broncos actually, they came in, I think, with one of the higher 3-and-out rates in the NFL, and they had 3 of them on Sunday night. But generally, I thought it was one of the better offensive performances of the season for the Broncos. And to some degree, you expect that, right, against a defense that ranked as low as Washington did. And I think the Broncos found some advantages from a speed perspective in the game. But, I think RJ Harvey, like, speaking specifically about him, he has that touchdown run, late in the game to give the Broncos the lead for good. Thought he made a couple of great blocks and pass protection, catching the ball out of the backfield. On that final overtime drive, which was just, again, 5 plays, 72 yards, he starts it off by picking up 12 yards. And I believe on that throw to Troutman for another 10 yards that got out to midfield, that he made a terrific block on a guy just screaming in to try right for Bo Nix, who would have been unblocked. And Harvey finds a way to get over and get him and let Nix make that throw. I think in time, you've got to get back to that kind of sustained running attack that we saw with J.K. Dobbins. But as Adam Troutman said on Monday, like, that's going to take some time. RJ's still a young player. Anytime you lose a guy like J.K., it's not easy. But as RJ's only going to continue to get better the more exposure he has to certain blocking schemes, certain defenses, where the hole's going to develop, how he can get to the second level, all those things. And as he figures those out, he's been good in the meantime. And then you've got Jaleel McLaughlin, who I think is a great complement to what Harvey can do. So I think that run game will continue to get there. In the meantime, I think you've seen Bo Nix pick up some of that slack, right? Whether with his own legs and his own rushing ability. We saw him take off several times, and Sean Payton mentioned that Monday as a critical part of what Bo Nix can do as a player. But just early on, like, for their first 5 drives were at least 10 plays, and you got to convert some of those from field goals to touchdowns, because the Broncos have a pair of an 11-play drive and a 13-play drive by the midpoint of the second quarter, and you could be up 14-0, and instead you're up 6-0, right? And so that's kind of where you let the Commanders stick around. If you go up 14-0 there, it's possible you just you're able to put them away early. You don't get into this. But then at the end of the first half, for them to respond to Washington taking the lead, going down, Sean Payton called that the difference in the football game, their ability to go down and score a touchdown. I think Ingram made a big play on that drive as well. And then the second half was not necessarily all easy sledding. You have your lone drive of the third quarter is a 11-play, 72-yard touchdown drive, which, again, I think that came right after the Commanders scored a touchdown. So each time the Commanders kind of came out and scored and took the lead, the Broncos on their next possession came out and retook the lead. So that was impressive. And we've talked before about, hey, how do you respond in those moments? That showed a good response, I thought. And then there's also this resilience factor, right, where Bo Nix throws a pick on the Broncos' first drive of the fourth quarter. Seems like he didn't see Bobby Wagner. It leads to points. Then the Broncos punt on 3 consecutive possessions, and it's not kind of clicking the same way it was early. How does he respond? He comes back in overtime and just deals, right? And leads the Broncos down the field, like I said, on that 5-play drive that results in the points. It was, he was 4 for 4 for 47, 59, I think 4 for 4 for 71 yards.
Wow.
Just on that overtime drive. And in Bo, you've got a guy that's now tied with John Elway for the most game-winning drives in a season in Broncos history. Second 300-yard game of the year, second 300-yard game on the road, I believe, first since last year in Cincinnati. So he keeps making plays. I know that I saw nationally this morning, someone said, hey, I don't trust the Broncos as a contender because still don't know what to think about the quarterback. And listen, whatever. People are going to think.
Hashtag analysis.
People are going to think nationally whatever they want to.
Yes.
I don't know how you can watch Bo Nix play and not believe that he's the guy and not see that, like, in the biggest moments, he finds a way to make a play. And I was thinking about this on the way in. The Broncos are, as we know, 8-2 in one-score games. They're 10-2 overall. And so I was like, oh, well, that means they haven't lost by more than a score either. I know it's been a long time since they've lost in general, but like their 2 losses, knock on wood, let's keep it rolling, not jinxing anybody, but like even the games they've lost or that they've been in, you normally see teams, and this was the case last year for Denver. There were some games, I know the Chargers game ended up being 1 possession last year, and there were a couple of games that kind of late the Broncos surged back in, but you haven't had a game where you've been outclassed. And for that to be the case 13 weeks into the season, I think it speaks to the competitiveness of this team and of the quarterback and what he's able to do. So I think, again, it's hard to win on the road. I haven't pulled it up yet, but I'd imagine like basically everything you look at, and Sean Payton loves to say this, that you ask him, hey, what's the key to playing well at home? What's the key to playing well on the road? What's the key to playing well early in the season, late in the season, playoff games? He tends to say, like, good teams win at home, good teams win on the road. And you're starting to see that translate. Like, Sean Payton has the best October record of any head coach in NFL history. Well, now you look at his November record, and I think he's 9-2 in November games with the Broncos. He's had 6 undefeated Novembers in his career. His November winning percentage is in the high 600s. And so you look at that, and it's like, I'm guessing the road record from 2016 to 2022 is probably not all that great for the Broncos. And you start to think of, hey, how many road, like, the Broncos have this smoke machine, and they've got these speakers that they use after they win a road game in particular. I think they do it at home too, but on the road, like, they have a portable one so they can bring it on the road.
Yeah.
And like, you could see the steam, the smoke coming out of the locker room yesterday. And Sean was like, we didn't escape here. We won.
Yeah.
And we're turning that smoke machine on, and we're turning the speakers up, and there's going to be loud music, and there's going to be a lot of smoke because we won. And it's hard to win on the road in this league. Mm-hmm. And the Broncos are now 4-2 on the road. And we talk about all the time, hey, how do you have a good season? It's win all your home games or almost all your home games, and you split on the road. The Broncos are, at the very worst, going to split on the road. And so it's just special what they've done, and excited to see it keep playing out. But, yeah, the offense, I think, I was encouraged, especially the way in the 2-minute situations. Like, you can't do that the whole game. And I know fans will say run tempo, run tempo, run tempo. With your defense as a strength, you don't necessarily always want to do that. But there was something to be said that, when you need it, you're confident with it.
You make a good point of just, like, understand, like, everyone's going to look at Bo Nix a certain way because they don't see him play every Sunday. They're not here on, boots on the ground watching him practice and things like that. One thing that they did during the broadcast last night was they showed all the quarterbacks that were drafted in Bo Nix's class. And at the top of the class, all the quarterbacks that were drafted were 3. It was Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Bo Nix. Bo Nix, who, when you tally all his wins, has the most wins of all the rookies drafted in his class. And on top of that, you look at those 3 quarterbacks. Caleb Williams sits right now currently top of the NFC. Bo Nix sits at the top of the AFC. And who's right behind him? Drake May. And so you have to give time for these quarterbacks to develop. And when you start buying into what they're doing there, because if you would have had this conversation last season, if this was going to happen this season, I guarantee those naysayers talking about Bo Nix would have said that that's not going to happen. We have a lot of people going into the season saying that the Broncos are going to be at the bottom of the division, and you look at how they've been able to really take control of their own destiny, and that's a big key of everything that's getting built here. And that's one thing that Adam Troutman said. He's like, it's the culture that's being built here. That's what we're buying into. He's like, it's cheesy, but we're playing for each other, and that's what makes this team special. I spoke about that as well when people ask me, like, what makes this team special? And I'm like, because these guys truly love playing for each other. They love being there for each other. And seeing Adam Troutman and Evan Ingram have a game yesterday was very encouraging because, again, it reminds you of what another area that you're looking to unlock. And just how everyone is stepping up, because that's what you're supposed to do. Pat Bryant had a few good catches. Jahdae Barron almost came up with a pick. And so you kind of have these guys that know, like, I need to make a play, but not for my own stats, but for the betterment of the team. And everyone's kind of pushing for that. So I think that's what makes good football teams, and that's what makes you push in the postseason when you kind of get into the situations that you're like, how are we going to get out of this? And it's like, well, we have before, or, well, we believe that we can. Because doubt can creep in very easily, and that's something that the Broncos have kept at bay since Sean Payton got here, and really just trusting what they're able to do. But Sunday night's fun. I enjoyed watching it. I'm sure you were stressed out.
I wasn't. I mean, at this point, I'm just like used to.
You're immune.
Not immune. Like, I was still nervous, but I think not until I would say, when was this? Like late in the game when the Commanders, did they tie it?
Looking it up on your Microsoft Copilot plus PC.
Good plug. Yeah, so it was when it was 4th and 6 at the Denver 45, and they converted that and have a 1st and 10 at the Broncos 37 with 34 seconds left. Then I started to be like, okay, well, let's keep him out of the end zone.
You were like, and how are we going to get out of this one?
And it's then it's 3rd and 3 at the Denver 20. They get another first down. Mariota, really kind of a risky play to take it and run. They didn't have a timeout, so if he gets tackled in bounds,
that was
the game's potentially over.
Yeah.
But when it was 1st and 10 from the Denver 14 with 12 seconds left, I was a little nervous then. And then certainly in overtime, after Debo catches that pass down to the 1, you're just and the Broncos, almost to their credit, kept him out of the end zone at all.
Yeah.
But I think you're just mentally preparing, and it sounds like Sean Payton's doing the same on the sideline of like, we know if they get in,
they're going to go for 2.
They're going to go for 2, and it's going to come down to one singular play. But yeah, we've been around a lot of these this year, and so you get used to them. And it's interesting how quickly the perspective can change, right? Because before the season, if you would have said, "Hey, the Broncos are going to be 9-3," everyone would have been like, "Holy cow!" Of course, like fan wise, external. But then if that pass goes over Nick Bonito's hand last night, and the Broncos are 9-3 now, you're thinking, man, we let one slip away in terms of staying in that race for the number 1 overall seed. But I mean, a few years ago, Sean Payton came in here, and I know we don't like talking about that Miami game a lot, but just think of how things have changed since then. And you get back-to-back 10-win seasons for the first time since 2014, 2015. You've got a quarterback that is doing things that hasn't been done in Denver since John Elway was here. You win 10 games a year ago when people thought you were going to be externally awful, right? You're not like one of the worst teams.
True, yeah.
You end up making the playoffs. Then this year, the Broncos and Sean Payton talked about, hey, we've got Super Bowl aspirations, but I still think externally a lot of people were like, oh, well, they could be a better team but finish with a worse record. And even though the Broncos kind of last year in 2024 was kind of this silent approach of we're not going to talk about it, we're just going to do it. This year there was a little more recognition of what they wanted to do, and people still didn't really believe in it. And I think you could argue that even now at 10-2, they don't externally believe in it, right? And yet the Broncos just keep finding a way to win. And in the course of just a couple of years, Sean Payton's got this team in the number 1 seed and in firm control of the AFC West. I think the latest numbers are an 85% chance of winning the AFC West. And depending on what site you look at, like DVOA, I think has the Broncos with more than a 50% chance of getting the 1 seed. Like, it's all in front of the Broncos here. And you've got 5 weeks left to find a way to get wins. And every single one you get, doesn't matter how pretty it is, it puts you a step closer to that all-important bye, because AFC right now is just it's wide open. Everybody can beat anybody, it seems like. And
that's a good way to say it.
If you can take one required game off your plate and guarantee that both potential playoff games would be at Empower Field at Mile High, that's just, and again, Sean Payton said it, doesn't mean you have to do that, right? Like, teams go on the road and win in the playoffs. And
but this is exactly why these road games matter, because you're showing that you can do that. Yeah. It's hard to win on the road, and they've learned from the 2 losses that they had there.
But even if you get the 2 seed, if you win, like you win your first 2 games, you're guaranteed still at least 2 home playoff games. Depending on the results of the other games, you might even still get the conference championship game at your stadium. At worst, you have to play 1 game on the road. So just being a division winner, being a highly seeded division winner is so critical, because it changes the whole, like, there's just teams where if you play this game at home versus on the road, it's an entirely different situation. And the Broncos' chances now, like, it feels like worst case they're going to get the 3 seed. If you look at the percentages, there's almost a 0% chance to get the 4. Like, so you're going to be guaranteed probably at least one home game, probably multiple home games if you're the 1 or the 2, assuming you win your first round game. And so you're putting yourself in position for all this. And whether it's this game against the Raiders coming up or you got big games against the Packers, like this final stretch of 4, no one will be able to say, hey, the Broncos have they barely pulled it out against this team that's struggling. Like, you're about to get to a really tough stretch, but the Raiders game comes first. It's a division opponent that we know just played the Broncos tough, so you got to be ready for that first. But yeah, it's getting real. And it's getting down to crunch time.
What you call it last week is this big boy football right now. As you mentioned, the Colts are going to play the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, and then you have the Eagles playing the Chargers on Monday Night Football. And
Texans playing that, right? Texans playing the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, I think.
Oh, it might be the Chiefs. I saw the Colts just played the Texans. That's what it was, right?
Yeah.
I should trust your memory. It's better than mine. But yeah, the Texans on a 4-game win streak as they face the Chiefs for Sunday Night Football. Then you have the Eagles, who have had a tough stretch of games, probably looking to bounce back, have a huge game on Monday Night Football against the Chargers. And then the Raiders, obviously, are playing the Broncos on Sunday. So we've said it every single podcast. Like, the AFC is not going to get easier. These games, as you mentioned, are only separated by a few games. Like, the Broncos are ahead, but as I mentioned, the wild card spots held by Buffalo, Indy, and LA are all tied at 8-4. And so there's a lot of teams in the hunt that are not that far behind. I mean, I think numerically, the Bengals still have a chance. I think depending on how some teams lose and things break away.
They probably have to win their division, but they could still get in. The Texans are a game back. The Chiefs are 2 games back.
Yeah. And I believe the Raiders are eliminated from playoff contention, but they love to play spoiler.
Yeah.
Any way that they can.
They played the Chargers tough for a significant portion of that game. I think it was 7-7, and then they kind of hung in there before it got out of hand a little bit. But we saw last year the Broncos go to Allegiant and struggle for the first half before pulling it out. So at this point, I kind of expect a close game, and I'll be pleasantly surprised if it's not. But against a division opponent, hard to expect anything other than that, I think. And this week coming up is going to be really important in terms of the playoff race. We'll put together a little guide of what all that means probably. And I have to look at it. The NFL has all these researchers who tell you the clinch scenarios.
Yeah.
Not positive. I'll have to see if there's any scenario where the Broncos could clinch a playoff spot this weekend, but certainly we're getting close. We're getting in the neighborhood where that's possible. And we're going to break all that down on Thursday's episode, because that is the episode where we preview the next matchup, which will be in Las Vegas, a road game against the Raiders. Again, Week 13 was all about upsets, but the Broncos were not one of those teams. They defeated the Washington Commanders 27-26 on Sunday Night Football. We appreciate you guys listening to another episode of Altitude Advantage. A reminder, for you to catch up on everything from instant analysis to locker room sound, head over to denverbroncos.com, as well as the Broncos official YouTube page to check out all that. And that game was late game. We're exhausted, but it's dub day. So Broncos country, continue to celebrate as we look ahead to Week 14. We'll have you covered on Thursday's episode of Altitude Advantage.